needed to make another video on the topic of what I think may be going on. Now, I don't know about the circumstances, but I remember the conversation about Lakina Chin and this Asian individual. And this person was always around. Jessica Savager, which this person was pretty universal, hung around straight women, but she tended to be always around Lakina a lot. And I've known this person for a long time that was connected to Patricia Gardina, at least I think it was, because I talked about that this person was knew about the sex change. Like, she had initially, before the sex change happened, had a conversation with her, and I was like, at that time, I was like 15 or 16 years old, and I remember being with John Basili, smoking weed with Jessica Savager, and we only did probably 2 or 3 times at most. So we'd walk up and down the streets and smoke weed, and that was pretty much it. But I was thinking, I know, pretty sure Jessica Savager is not a transgender, but it's kind of boggling because she was her that was with us when I smoked weed when I went to Lakina's Chin's house. I only walked into that house once, and I talked about this guy named Charlie, who was an Asian guy who was really large. But I thought I would make a conversation about that because, it's not going to change the fact that how Richard John Basili, Nick Carrera, and Cisco's was behaving when I was around her, and it all falls on me. It all falls on me still because they're fine. The time is gone. My mother's just being played like a stupid bitch as they treat her and have her, and then give her all the money and bullshit because she can't think for herself. And I feel very strongly that my mother's not in a much worse state mentally, because when I spoke to her, she doesn't behave that way. My mother is not someone that, when she looked over toward Michaela's direction, would say, okay, I'm going to go I got to use the restroom. And she said this, and my mother does not behave that way. That is a projective character of someone. That is a projector of someone that is being trained. That's not I know that was my mother when I had lunch with her at that Mexican restaurant. But I know that's not, she doesn't do that. Because what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to, obviously it's a double-edged sword. You have to give her confidence and security, because the President of the United States he needs a trash can. That's what he's using her for Osama bin Laden and burying my sister, then feel comfortable, then the transgender movement for his fucking daughter and all this other shit. But that isn't my mother's character. It isn't. It is not my mother's. She doesn't. The way that she looked and expressed it looked like they gave candy to a baby. Like, they went over to my mother and they said, "Oh, here you go, Susana. You see, we're giving you power. You see, you're confident with yourself. Now, you need to behave aggressive with Hector." And then Barack Obama and transgenders, and the gays. We'll give it to the gays and twins. And so I think it's important for me to talk about, because my mother doesn't project her sort of anger that particular way. And I know by looking at her, it didn't look like she was it didn't look like, I don't even know how to explain, because it reminds me of my father. It reminds me when a person has this type of severity of brain damage, or like Alzheimer's, which my mother always said Alzheimer's, but my dad didn't have Alzheimer's because my dad committed suicide. And my mom told me that for 8 years. All she ever told me, he has Alzheimer's, he has Alzheimer's, he has Alzheimer's. and my dad committed suicide in front of me. And I remember having an argument in our house, and I talked all about this. But that was a way for my mother to say, like, he did it to himself, because it all of a sudden just happened. He just like died, like just out of nowhere. So I think it's important for me to talk about, because all I hear is the cries of my mother. I don't know how to explain the drenching, because I know Barack Obama and his fucking goons and his fucking worthless faggots and his white supremacists are doing this to my mother to get the glory, and they will. And now they shot me in my chest for Jesus Christ, for Barack Obama though, huh? So it's not going to change. They're playing my mother like a stupid bitch. That's 100%, 100,000%. There's nothing in this life that, to my dying cancer death, that I know that they played her stupid. They played her stupid, and they needed a trash can, and they did. And it's very difficult, because I am my mother's #1 defender. Frankie had, when my mother got raped, and I talked about this, and I don't blame Frankie for this. When my mother came home from the neighbor's house, and she was like, she looked like she had been violated. I didn't see any bruises. I didn't see any cuts or scars. She was just pouting, and I remember her sort of flinching and running, getting scared of this guy, and I think it was Ivan's father. And I don't know if it was Ivan's father, but he looked like he was related to Ivan. All my mother kept on saying is, "Está feo, está prieto, ugh," right? Prieto means the guy's dark, he's black, you like that. And my mother was just like sort of crying, had her arms like this. He said, "No, it's okay, I don't like that, I don't like that." And my mother was coming from the bathroom, and Frankie knew. And I said, "Hey, was Mom going over there?" And he could almost tell my mother was raped. And he looked over at my mother, she was sitting at the couch, and said, he goes, and he's looking at her like, "Yeah." And he sort of just walked away and walked into his room. But it was because he was trying to guide my mother and saying, "Don't go over there," but he's being raped in all these situations, so it backfires on my mother. But I want to talk about this because I know that this is, it isn't going to change that I know Ken Cooper's dead. He's been dead for a long time, and they're going to wait that to exchange it for my dead sister, Osama bin Laden, and the comfort for Barack Obama. And he uses his people to go after me. He's not ruling a punishment on any more than me and my mother. All he has to do is think about the burn victim in Iraq, the guy that got his leg shot off or whatever. Not to even mention, I still believe my mother committed suicide. I still believe my mother, I think, I don't know what the situation is, because it just seems so suspicious. What seems even more crazy about this is I thought, what happens if somebody attacked my mother? What happens if somebody got their car or something, and because they took the twin and they went after my mother and beat her ass, or they beat my mother up, or they got their car and beat my mother with a bat or some crazy shit, and they never told me anything. Because I don't know about, I said this a long time ago. I said, I don't know, I just seemed kind of suspicious, because my mom already seemed very stressed. My mom seemed extremely stressed before the accident, because she looked like she was running. Like when I first got back from when I was 18 and my mom came back to the house. My mother very much looked like she was on the run. She didn't want to be around Lucio, and she looked like she was being controlled. And she came, I know it sounds bad, but because, you're talking about white supremacy and the niggas for Ken Cooper and Kenneth, because he's dead, and then Sarah, and then Madison. It isn't going to change any of these things, how horrible. It always falls on me. The pain always falls on me, and it is always drenching in a very bad, nasty way. But it doesn't change. it doesn't change. It doesn't change on my mother. So it doesn't matter how much, because as far as I know, you don't have to believe anything I have to say. And you didn't believe anything I had to say, nor did you question me to let me respond in any kind of way. You did a full-blown investigation on me like I was a perpetrator against my mother. That's what you did. And they sent psychologists. I still remember the guy named George that that showed up on my job site running this vicious psychology game at me at Cellstar when I was working for a cell phone company. I was 18 years old and I was dying. I was like 135 pounds. Breaking out on my face horrifically. I looked like I was dying. I had so much, the acne on that's a whole nother story, but I say this because my mother, like the way that she stood by the door and the way that my mother's like, oh, I don't want, and she had already, my mother at this point, when I was 18 years old, she just didn't want to be over there. She was like, no, I don't want to be over there. I don't like it. And she was more in her healthy state of mind. Now, once her accident happened, I don't know what happened. Who's to say that somebody didn't sneak up and do a hit on my mother, and it was these transgenders? So it isn't going to change. Kenneth Cooper and Lynette and Michelle all played in on it. There's nothing more. What I have to do is I have to search for forgiveness, and I have to look for how is it that I can move forward in any kind of way from this, because I know that this is not going. I didn't win anything. There's no justice. My life got taken from me, my mother's, and it was going to these sloppy pigs. It did. You didn't make them suffer, because the friends that I had weren't my friends. Many of them weren't. They were just using me and abusing the shit out of me. It didn't matter how kind I was to these people. I opened my house to these people and my fucking refrigerator, and I gave them the little food that I was fucking eating. But, it's a harsh situation, because it's very, if I ignore my mother and the fact that all these situation happens, then it ignores the cries that she always told me when I was younger for President Barack Obama, because this niggas and his transgender and whatever secret society they have, and George Bush, those are murderers. They like killing people. They like destroying people. They don't feel like normal human beings. They don't cry. They don't feel like normal human beings. They think they do, and they practice that they do, but they're not. And it is Nazi soldier. Just like this Nazi soldiers that were pulling the lever of gas chambers and just doing their job and killing hundreds of thousands of people, this person doesn't feel it doesn't give a goddamn fuck. He has the power to shoot the gun, to say this and that, and he is not going to. He needs to benefit his own family and his own country and his own purpose. He doesn't give it's like Hitler. And the same thing with George Bush, if not worse with George Bush, because he's killed so many people on death row. And regardless if you've killed a lot of people or not, and how horrific it was, and how people want to feel that you should kill people on death row, you're still taking human life. It doesn't matter. You're still killing another human being, and you're just saying fuck you. I don't care. Kill him. You're still practicing death. That's what you practice more than anything else. And it's a very difficult situation, because my mother has this first grade education. I was around my mother more than Frankie was. And it becomes a tug of war to say, well, who was closer to my mother, me or Frankie? Well, he's gay with the gay movement, and then have the gays attack me and break me down just like he did my mother, and then gays. Oh, and then the twins gays, and then that's a double combo, because you too? Okay, you too. And that's something that they kept on doing to me as well that I haven't spoken about. They keep saying you too, like, oh, your mother just gets to shit something out too. Oh, and then has another kid on you too, because then you two get to be famous and get what you want free. Okay, but then we're gonna go after you too, Hector. And they just keep doing it to me. But I think it's important for me to talk about because in this particular type of situation that's going on, it's hard. It's hard for me because I know that the president murdered my mother. I know he just mutilated her like a stupid bitch, just using the identical twin. I'm not allowed to represent my mother in any retaliation against these pigs. Kenneth, Michelle, Sarah, nobody understands that. Look, let me tell you something. Let me tell you how vicious this is going to get. How vicious and nasty this gets with Robert Palomo in New York. This is what he does. This is how he justifies it. I've shared this conversation before, but now I know what he was talking about. This is what he did. Right? He was very nice to me. He helped me, remember, but he makes a lot of money. I don't know his life. I don't know if he was prostituting. I don't know the situation. I don't know if he was a sex slave, and that's what I think he was. But when I was 20 years old, he came and visited me. And I think it was like when I was 21 or 22, it was before my transplant. And I think we went to go eat at Chili's. Was it Chili's he had? Yeah, it was either Chili's, and also he showed up several times at Nan's house and Joe, which Nan and Joe they're not alive anymore. They're supposed to be dead. I don't know if they would have to be like 100 years old by now. But Nan and Joe and I went to their house, and I would go eat, right? I have no recollection and memory of reason why they would ever want to do. They just let my mother go about her life. Why are you going to retaliate? They didn't tell me about the fame. They didn't tell me about, I didn't know they were transgenders either. So Nan is coming at me, training me as well, along with Joe, against my mother. But this is what Robert Palomo does. He says, you know what? He goes, you know what? I saw, and he already knows the sort of argument that we had with Frankie, me and Frankie, that they were causing Sarah and the other side of Sarah's family, and Kenneth, and Robert, Michael, Sarah, they were trying to pull me and Frankie apart from each other and hate each other. The reason was because it would dissemble my mother even more. But this is what Robert Palomo turns it on me. And he says, he goes, you know what? He goes, he goes, it's a small world. He goes, I went to a hotel to do some work. He goes, I turned to my left or turned to my right. He goes, I walked in and then I turned to my left, and this is how he expresses it, Hector. He goes, I walked into the hotel to do some work and I turned to my left, and there was Rosie right there. He's talking about Miguel. I turned around and the rapist is right there, saying Rosie was the one that was protecting Frankie because Miguel was the rapist. Rosie was the one that protected me and those kids because Miguel was there with a transgender. I didn't know Rosie was a transgender. I didn't know Diana was a transgender. And that's what Robert Palomo did. Robert Palomo's, he's a much more kind-hearted person, without a doubt. There is something about him that does, like, say that he has a kind heart to him. It's not just because he just gave you money. His character fits of someone of that nature. He's a very hardened person, but and can be crazy. But he to me he has a sweet spot, in my opinion. So I think it's important for me to talk about, because he said this, and I don't know if also he was questioned because he knew about the rape. Obviously, I talked about that whenever we went to the funeral. He directly looked over at Miguel, and he stopped and looked, and he looked at him fucking pissed. Robert looked at him like, you motherfucker, you show up to this funeral and disrespect my father. Because you got to keep in mind, as much as I said that I was attached to my father, Robert is loved my father. And this guy showing up, and he stood right in front of us three, and he looked over at Miguel and looked at him like, "You want some?" And like war, like and he very angry because this is in front of his casket and everything. And Robert Paloma, I don't know how he got along with Sarah, but it was kind of sketchy. But I know that they didn't particularly get along all that great. I don't believe they did. But I think it's important for me to talk about because in the ideas that everything that's kind of going on with my mother. Now, it's very hard because of all these things that I experienced. I didn't understand how vicious these predators were. How they were backstabbing me brutally. I talked about that. Nan and Joe, especially Nan, my Raymond Palomo's sister, she tried converting me into like some homosexual to become a transgender, and I remember that as a little kid, and I got really scared. And I was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like, and I remember backing off. And I remember they were very predatorial with my mother when she had the babies with my dad. She was literally like a slave carrying one baby. So it's hard because I remember all the things. If you had every hyena and every predator going after you and being so disgusting toward you, and you did nothing wrong, and you were already prostitute, and you just kept on just trying to be a peasant, and that's all you lived for, and they were still disgusting, and they had all this money. Nan and Joe lived in a $500,000 fucking house. Not even, well, yeah, $500,000. That house was worth about $400,000 to $500,000 30 years ago. They live in a fucking nice ass house. That house is fucking huge and very luxury. Pretty luxury, at least luxury to the world that I live in. You walked in there and it was a fucking two massive living rooms, a large kitchen, backyard. It had like 4 or 5 bedrooms. It was a lot of square feet per that house. Square feet per what do they call it? Square feet per square inch house or whatever. But I say that I think it's important because I think it's important to talk about, and so hopefully this resonates. I'm going to move on to another subject because it's not going to do a lot more particularly in that subject because I've said what I needed to say, and there's more I could probably pick away at it, but I wanted to say also that what happens when Patricia Gadina dies? I don't know what the expectancy life is for someone who has a sex change, what that does to a person. Now, that person had a wig. That means they were losing all their hair. It means the stress of what that sex change and chemicals of the drugs that they were taking did something very mentally ill to that person. Very mentally ill. What happens when this person dies? What happens if this person dies in the next couple of years? How do you think that's all going to be retaliated against me with the gay, homosexual, and especially transgender movement? And how they're going to justify it then? Was that for you? Or was that for me? Or was that for Barack Obama and the transgender? Who was that for? Who's the one got infected and violated? Oh wait, it was the people that were shooting me with electronic devices. You know what? She died for Marissa Miranda, or whatever her name was. That's what she died for. But I think it's important for me to talk about because, there's nothing that I can do about it. It bothers me a lot, but there was also some other, subjects I also wanted to kind of go over with because the retaliation is so vengeful that it's only going to get worse. If I outlive Patricia Gadina, it's only going to get worse and used as a movement against me for the rest of my life, without a doubt. and they want to justify it to retaliate against my mother because they're the ones that are full control over the money and bitching my mother out. All the homosexuals and gays, Dana White, UFC president, and all these other faggots, and the movement that they're doing and the secret lies that they live, many of them, including MMA fighters and boxers, the whole entertainment world belongs to them. Everything belongs to them. Every fucking goddamn thing. Every fucking goddamn thing. And they're extremely vengeful and much more intelligent than any female is going to be able to do, because they control. They're males and they control, and they're vengeful. They're murdering, disgusting, vengeful. By far 10 times what a straight individual man can do. 10 times that. Maybe even more than that's more than 10 times that. More vengeful, like Hitler. You know, homosexual and genocide. It feels nothing, guttering, just crazy shit. So I think it's important, you know, because, you know, I'm watching Oprah Winfrey how she's trying to portray my mother at the Oscars and playing her stupid. And she's literally getting on stage and just playing her stupid, like my mother's. They're doing this on stage. They're role playing my mother like a stupid bitch. Oprah Winfrey was doing this. I also saw Oprah Winfrey at the president's house, and then she looked over at the camera, and I know she's talking directly toward me, and she goes like that, and like gives me a very threatening look. And so this person's a billionaire, and there's the one that put President Barack Obama and funded the millions of dollars he needed for his campaign. So, to become president, and he's black. You know, she's black. She's one of the most racist for the black niggas and person anywhere in the entertainment world. Everybody knows that. But I think it's important for me to talk about because, you know, when I look at my mother and I'm at this restaurant, she's being trained and told, okay, so that's how you hold your ground. Now retaliate against your son, and we use the identical twin, because there's a lot of crazy shit that's going on. I still don't know if my Uncle Beto's a transgender. I don't know if he is. I have suspicions sometimes that he does, but I've seen him without his shirt on. And he didn't look like he had any surgery or anything like that. But I find it weird because I remember he used to have these whiskers, you know, and he couldn't barely grow facial hair. And, you know, the fact is that most guys go bald and he still has a full set of hair. Women always have a full set of hair throughout their life. Most of them do. But I think it's important for me to talk about because I don't know if my uncle is a transgender and gave birth, I have suspicion sometimes of it, but they put him, he's living on a ranch somewhere by himself and with like 3 other roommates. I don't know what the situation is with that. But that kid he has over at Beto's house, that looks like his kid. Without a doubt, that is from his bloodstream. That is from his blood. There's no doubt about that I think about that. But she kind of doesn't, you know, kind of doesn't look like, you know, Beto. And I have suspicions that one of the reasons that I think that Beto is connected to someone that sold my mother for sex and had my mother raped. You know how women will tell a guy, go after this one and put the pressure? Which I think she was good. I think she was kind and everything, but I didn't know anything and they could bury me. You gotta understand, I know exactly their characters. They don't work, they don't like working, they never had jobs, and they're vile. I mean, there's a whole lot of shit that I sometimes think, because why did my mother take a baby carriage with Lucio over to Beto's house? And I remember how my mother was walking when she walked in the house with Lucio, and my mother was like, she looked like she was the one that was being carried like a baby. and that she looked like she was in full-blown control, and I really didn't even talk to her. She really didn't make any eye contact with me, because when I was living over there and I saw them bring their baby carriage in, my mother barely made eye contact, and she looked like she was, come here, I'll tell you what to fucking do, bitch. You do exactly what the fuck and she was military. Very like, okay, what do I do? Okay, and just like just obedient. Like, just, you better do what I tell you to do, otherwise, you know what I'm gonna take away or what I'm gonna do to you. So, I think it's important for me to talk about, because it's important, you know. The reason I say that I think it's important is because I don't know what the circumstances exactly is when it comes to that. I don't know, maybe my uncle, because look, I've never shared this before, and I was scared to do this, and I may have said this many years ago, but if he's a transgender, becomes problems, because, okay, I talked about that whenever I went to Christy's house. She was like 41. She's my age at that time. She was like 40 or 41. And she was a brunette, blue eyes. Her eyes, you know, some people's eyes colors change. And I remember, she's a hot girl. I really regret not sleeping with her. And I was about to. I was going to sleep with her. And I could do 100% living in that house. It was invitation, like, for sex. And it wasn't like a lot of pressure. I kept it cool for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And I was thinking about it. I was just thinking about it, but I was getting harassed at my job site at EPA and in my work environments, that they knew what was happening in that house. And I remember I was planning to, and I was going to like eventually come on to her, because there was all the red flags that you can imagine that we were going to have sex. And I talked about it in the middle of the night. She showed up when I was, had a real bad flu, and she came and gave me a towel, and it was like, I thought we were going to have sex right then and there, and I wanted to, but I was kind of feeling very, very like I was sick, like I had the flu. I wanted her so bad at that time, and I was just like close, but I didn't. And I was just like, okay, so I got to go to work. I got to heal. There's other girls out there, and I just want to have a good girlfriend. A friend that I live with. It's a friend, and then maybe later. But everyone knows that it ends up in sex. She had a really nice bed, and I remember, within 2 months, there's other guys show up, and they were like coming on to me, like sort of threatening me to kind of like. There was a guy that looked like James, and then there was this. Eventually, about 2 months after they started sending all these people and targeting me, peeling out in front of the house. They targeted her and some guy, This guy looked like a pig. This guy is a full-blown pig, and he said he owned a bunch of car washes. And in these car washes that he owned, this guy looked like Ken Cooper, but real fat, even fatter. But he looked like a pig. He was real fat, like round face. He looked like a slave owner. He was real bald head, shaved head, like a skinhead, and just real fat, and like bubble fat. And I remember he sort of had these attitudes when he saw me, like, no, you don't get her. And he was acting sort of crazy and shit. So I end up, within like She ends up breaking it off with this guy, and you could tell that they targeted her. They told her, no, you don't get that, you get this from me. And then there was two females, and then there was some other guy that showed up that I think was gay, and then sat in the living room trying to convince her to kick me out. And I know that's what they were doing. And I remember having to run to the restroom and having to explode all this fucking shit out of my ass. And it was embarrassing because she could hear that, and all the other two individuals did. It was, I don't know if they shot an electronic device that did that. That's kind of what triggered it. That kind of ruined the sexual appeal that she could possibly have, right? That somebody, I think, shot an electronic device, and I remember having to run to the restroom and just shitting all, like, massively in the bathroom. Like, fucking pounds of fucking food. And, yeah, I know that it was unusual because I wasn't sick. Anyway, there was all there was all the signs. There was no doubt in my mind we were going to eventually have sex. We were. I wanted it, she wanted it, but she knows there was a reason why I was resisting. And I talked about this. Look, I went to church with her one day, and she invited me to church, and I went into this classroom, Bible study, and there was nothing but females in there. There was the teacher that was sort of kind of a blondish woman. She looked over at, there was 5 of us there was like 5 or 6 of us in the class, and then the teacher. And we were sitting at tables, and like 3 long tables. And I'm telling you, every inch of that situation was like, I could feel the sense that I was the guy that every female wanted. Like, they were actually sort of fighting toward each other to see who was going to get me. And it felt great, but I remember the teacher looking over at her because they knew, and they had gossiped all this information over to Christy, saying, oh, so you think you want to have sex with him? And so that's none of their business to harass her and do this to her. I'm 27 years old, a year before I get raped by the transgender, 8 months before I get raped by the transgender. I walk outside the door. Now, you don't have cameras for this. We get done with class, and there's just a lot of tension, like she feels that she's getting from all these people. I could tell by looking at her, she's getting a lot of tension. Like, she's feeling very pressured that they're telling her, you can't have sex with me, you're a bad little girl. And she's very reluctant in defending herself. I'm walking by myself. We walked out of the class, and when I walked out of the class first, or after everyone left, I see Jeremy's mother waiting for me. And she's waiting at the door, and she does this when I'm walking down the hall, and she looks at me, oh, Hector, oh, I didn't know, and is doing this. So she knows about the gossip. This is Jeremy's mother. Now, I want to talk about this because this is the harassment that's going on, and she eventually had to kick me out because I remember the 3 people. They literally sat next to her, putting a lot of pressure, and I think this guy was gay. Could have been, maybe not, but he was sitting in front of her, squatting, and like looking at her like, you're a bad little girl, you shouldn't be trying to sleep with him, you don't want him, no, that's not what you want. This is what they were doing, and I walked by in the living room, and I could see what they were doing. And there was a lot of tension, the sexual arousal, there was sex in the air with me and her. Like, they knew we hadn't had sex. And let me tell you, 2 months of me staying there, since we didn't have sex, there was a guy that showed up and had sex with her. And it was just some one-night stand. I don't know who it was. I think they put the pressure on her really bad. I could just tell, because I remember, I didn't see the guy who screwed her, but there was another guy that stayed in one of the other rooms while the other one screwed her. I don't know what the situation was, what this was. And I could hear her, they were having sex, but then all of a sudden, after maybe 30 minutes or an hour, he started anally screwing her. And I could hear her like she was in pain. like she was just being bent over and dealing with it. And somebody was. And I never saw the guy again. I didn't know who it was. I didn't take a look at the guy. He never came back again, whatever. So somebody had sold her to go screw her. And it was to put me down in sort of the sexual seduction that builds up attraction. It's a samba dance. You have no business to be violating both partners. They just want to intervene, saying who you get and what I don't get and what she doesn't get and what's going to happen with her life and what's going to happen with mine. People are peeling out in front of the house with their cars and shit. Anyway, I thought I'd talk about that. Now, this is when I want to lead this in conversation to. When I called my uncle, I told Christy, I said, I gotta leave. He goes, she said, Hector, it's not gonna work. You gotta go ahead and move out. I don't think it's gonna work between us. And she got so much, and there was, everything was good between me and her. Someone put her up to it. There was a lot of harassment and pressure, and that's why I got kicked out. So she ends up leaving. I end up saying, okay, I'm gonna move out. I clean the fucking place. She gives me my deposit, but only like $150, and then I leave. And her boyfriend shows up, this fat guy, and he only been dating her for like 3 weeks. And this guy was not, it was like when he walked into that house and I was watching TV, he was walking in like it was his house, he's the boss, and he says what's gonna go happen with my life. And I'm looking at him like, what the fuck is this crazy motherfucker just showing up? And he's just like a pig, like a fucking, he thinks he's a lieutenant pig. Looks like Ken Cooper. So anyway, the day that I move out, I call my uncle because I get nervous that this guy may want to do something. It just kind of vile, and I also need help to pick up the desk. I don't want to ask them for any help. The tension between me and her is now turned into something negative the last few days because of the pressure she was getting not to have sex with me, and then she was having attraction toward him. I'm 27, she's 41. Now, my uncle shows up, and it definitely 100%, it looked like he was in support of me. As I'm walking to the living room and I turn around and I look at my uncle, he looks at me like he's looking at the back of my head or at the back of me, like he's putting me in my place, 100%. But I don't say anything. And I remember very quickly, because I turned all the way around and looked at him, and he's looking at me like, I'm gonna get your ass. Like, he kind of like, the guy that walked, the fat guy, he looked at Bethel, and it was kind of like two separate gangs in the living room. And he was they were on the edge of the doorway in the kitchen as I was getting my stuff to leave. And it was like at night. So I think it's important for me to talk about this because if he's a transgender or somebody's telling him what to do and manipulating him, that's why he may be resourceful to someone because they can use him to maybe want to do something. He maybe not be in the mental state, but I don't know if he's a transgender now. I think he has some pretty good common sense, some good senses, but I think it's important for me to talk about because I do remember that. And so when all these psychologists put all this power, whatever it is that they're doing with my mother, they use all this situation to scum my other family members, to then scum it on my mother, scum at me, and then Sarah Cooper and Ken Cooper and Kenneth. Because remember, Kenneth at the radio station was the one that did all this. Michelle was the one that was threatening me with the police, and so was Lynette. Lynette actually threatened me there, and she said, "Oh, you want to get a lawyer?" When I was at that house, claiming that she was the one that were protecting the twins and they were retaliating against me. She's the one that said, "Oh, Lynette," Sarah Cooper said, "Oh yeah, Lynette works for a lawyer's office." And this is when we're at the house. I'm 20 years old. But I think it's important for me to talk about because so if we fast forward to when I'm 20 years old and I go at that house and I'm sitting across Sarah Cooper, she tells me and takes ownership. She's the one that built that house for my mother. This is how she does it when she's looking at me. She goes, yeah, you know that house next door? Yeah, and she looks away when she's doing this. She goes, yeah, we built that house for her. He goes, yeah, me and Ken, we built that house for her. And that's exactly how she physically behaves. Like, we built that house for her. So she's projecting the most toxicity and ownership because they're scavenging out any information I know about whether my mom got this $1 million house. But they think I'm trying to steal her first house, so now I'm trying to steal the mansion, so Hector's the enemy. And this is what Sarah and Ken Cooper are doing this together. This is what they do. So she tells me so that I mentally digest and accept she's the one that built that house for my mother. So she emotionally gets that taste and gratitude. And going against the enemy Hector because he's the one that's trying to steal the house from him. Remember how evil he is? I can't let him know. And me and Karen knew about Frankie being raped and didn't tell Raymond Palomo or my mother. You see how I'm going to turn the tables on you now? But you're too stupid because remember police? Remember the police? Remember? 20 years old, from then on is when I start getting tickets, harassed and threatened by the police. Keep his mouth shut because maybe he'll end up in prison. No, I'm 14 years in prison of not being able to have sex the minute I got raped. So I thought I want to talk about, and something else I want to talk about is, I don't know if Ricky's a transgender. The only reason I say this, right, crazy enough, I think maybe I've seen him without a shirt off. And I don't know how people have sex changes or not, but I don't know. One day I'm going to say when I was walking with Frankie one day, and Frankie looked at me. He goes, "Hey, you know Ricky, right? You know he's a." And kind of looked at me and kind of gave a funny look. I don't know if he said he was a girl or something, or knew or suspected, but he got along with Ricky very well. They walked home together several times. They joked around. Ricky was a jokester. And the reason I say this is because Ricky, he had a Trans Am. He had a Trans Am, Pontiac Trans Am, 10,000 miles. I don't know, but he paid $10,000. It had like 30,000 miles. He kept it in mint condition. He just turned it on every once in a while to warm up the engine. It was in mint condition. A transgender Trans Am. That's what he had, a Trans Am. It was blue, purplish kind of looking like. And I remember he never drove the car, and I thought, that's kind of weird. The reason I say this is because I went swimming with Ricky before. It's me, Daniel Box, Robert Zarate, and Ricky. When his mom used to live in that big house next to McCoy Elementary in Carrollton, like the next street over, they had a swimming pool in the backyard, and we went swimming in the backyard several times in the swimming pool, and with Daniel Box. And when I was with Daniel Box, we had a great time. I remember Ricky, we were all wearing a boxer. We weren't wearing a swimming shorts. We were wearing our boxers because it was like the last minute. It was just wear your boxers. And it's kind of like nervous because at that time we're all like 13 years old. I think I was 13 years old, maybe early 14, not older than 14. And I'm like 125 pounds, I'm scrawny and shit, and Robert, you kind of see our kind of testicles or some shit, or dicks, because we're all wet and shit, it sticks to our pants, and we're trying to hide ourselves kind of, or at least I am. I remember Ricky was in his boxers too, and I don't know what Ricky said to Daniel, because Ricky said, Daniel said something like dildo or something. He says the word dildo or something, and Ricky got real pissed off, like he was going to beat up Daniel, because I've seen Ricky charge Scott Springer in a real fight, like in his house, and he told he didn't want Scott Springer showing up at his house. And we were inside his house with Daniel Box, and I don't know, it was me, Daniel Box, I think Brian, or some other kid. I don't think Robert was there that day. But I remember Ricky went into Daniel's room and said, "Come here." He goes, "You come over here again, I'm gonna beat your fucking ass." And he started saying that. He said, "I'm gonna beat your fucking ass." Those are exact words. He goes, "I'm gonna fuck you up." He goes, "Don't you talk to me like that." Or he said something. I don't know what the situation, but Ricky did not like Scott Springer at all. They never got along. I don't know what the situation was. I don't know what the argument was. I don't know what the build-up. And he was for real. Ricky was, and he just went back into his room, got out of the room, and was kind of perking up his chest like he was pissed, like he really was. And I don't know what the situation. I still don't know to the day it was, and I remember. This is one of the reasons I think he may be a transgender, is because when I was about 15 years old, Bruce, Joe, and Chris Martinez used to joke around about Ricky having a dildo, and they used to call him Strictly Dickly. We're Strictly. And I don't know what the joke was. I still to this day I don't know what this was. But he said there was something about a story about a dildo and Ricky. I don't know what the story was. I didn't know they told. I just know that it was a funny thing that used to piss off Ricky, that they would call him Strictly. And I remember Joe doing that in front of me a few times. He goes, "Oh look, it's Strictly," and Ricky would get all confrontational with like Joe. And I remember Chris Martinez would be leaning up against his car and talking to Bruce and Joe and be like, "Oh no, man, we're going to go to Strictly's," and they'd start laughing. So I don't know if it's because they had a dildo that Ricky had or something. I don't know what, but they called him. It had to do something with a dildo. There was a story, something about a dildo. I don't know. I never got told about it. I just know that. I don't know if he was playing a joke on somebody. He had a dildo. I don't know if he caught somebody else's dildo and Ricky took it, or I don't know what it is. But it was a story about a dildo, and it was something about Strictly saying he used a dildo, and I thought it was weird. I just don't, because this is the only way I found out is because Chris Martinez, Bruce, and Joe used to joke about it, but they never told me what. And I asked him. We're kind of talking outside in front of Daniel's house. He goes, "Why do y'all call him Strictly? And I kept on saying, and they wouldn't tell me. And I remember Joe looking over at Chris, like giving him this look like he doesn't know. But I still don't know until like 2 or 3 years later. I never questioned it. I think. I don't know. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I said something. I said when I was by myself walking, seeing Daniel, and I asked Ricky, I asked Daniel. I said, "Why do they call him your brother Strictly? Why do Strictly Dickly or Strictly? I don't. They call him Strictly, and I didn't know what the joke was. I don't know what, because people, they call Dirty Mike because Michael was real dirty, and they call whoever it was a nickname because of something, but they never told me why. And so I remember them laughing all the time. I remember them, all three of them, laughing, and they used to call him Strictly. And Joe was the one that said it in front of me, in front of him, and I didn't know what the story was to that. So, they never joked about it a whole bunch. They just did it a few times. And I remember being in front of Chris Martinez and Joe and said, "Why do y'all call him Strictly? What are you talking about, a dildo?" Because you don't know he has a dildo or uses a dildo. And I thought it was like a gay thing. I guess I thought it was because he was gay or something, or he had it as a joke. Because I've seen kids when I was like 14 years old. There used to be a kid, Jamie Lynch's brother, Lauren Lynch. He used to take a dildo on the bus, and he would go around all the other students slapping his mother's dildo to all the kids on their face. And I'm not kidding, this is what he would do. And I was like riding on the bus and shit, and so but I wanted to talk about this because I don't know if he is, and he never told me. I remember he just stayed quiet and like angry, focused, but not necessarily at me, because I asked him, like, "Why do they call you Strictly? What do they call him? Why do they call you Strictly? I don't understand." And I thought I called him one strictly because it was a joke. They used to call me, you know, uh, uh, Hector the Palomo the Homo, or Hate on Hector Week or whatever. But um, I say this because he didn't say anything, and then I never said it again. And I asked Daniel. Daniel didn't tell me. He goes, "Don't worry about it. You don't know Hector." He didn't explain anything. So I just go about my life, and then I think like several years later, I'm going to Ricky's house occasionally. We'll watch sports. And when I go to his house one day, I'm just curious, and I bring up so I say, "Hey, why did they call you Strictly? I never figured out why they called you Strictly. Why did they call you Strictly? Like Strictly or something? I don't know. Why did they give you that nickname?" And I remember standing in front of the TV. He's kind of looking at me, and I don't know what the situation is. And he's kind of looking at me like, I don't think he knows. And he's like testing me. But I don't think anything of it. He goes, I gotta go do something, Hector. He goes, I'll talk to you later, man. I gotta go. And I'm in the living room. It's like, all right, after there for an hour. A couple weeks later, a month later, I show up again, bring a 6-pack of beer, and watch some TV, sports again. And we're talking, whatever, chilling, watching sports, joking. That's it, pretty much. There isn't really much to it. I would be very shocked. I mean, that's definitely one. There's definitely one of the people that didn't show very many signs that they were transgender at all. I mean, they were born female at all, if that's the case. Kenneth, you could, without a doubt, you 100%. There was something not right. Something like he was female, but. I thought I'd talk about that because the weird thing is because I know Ricky. Ricky played football. He played football on a team, and he played football on for a while, for a couple years or a year or so. But I do remember that Ricky, he got a scholarship, or his dad paid for a scholarship to Texas. Was it Texas Tech? I think he went to Texas Tech, or I don't think it was North Texas, but he went to university. He actually went to a university college, and he played college football. That's what I was told he did. And he was gone for like a year. He was gone for like 10 months or like a full year. He was gone. And I remember that he went off to play college football, and I don't know what the situation, but James had said and Daniel said that because I thought he got a scholarship, I thought he was one of those scholarship football players to get football. I was like, oh wow, I guess he really did good or whatever. I don't know how the procedures at that time, how people get scholarships for college to play football. And their grades, I don't know, have any earthly idea how that would happen, so it works. But I think Daniel, I remember saying, he said that his dad, no, he goes, no, my dad paid for it. He goes, no, my dad paid for him to go to college, to go play college football. So his dad is the one that spent the money for him to go to play college football. So regardless, I don't know how that works. I guess his dad, I was assuming that his dad always had a lot of money because his dad always had a lot of money. His dad used to always have a lot of money in his drawer many years ago that Daniel Box can verify with. He used to steal money from his dad all the time in one of his drawers, and he used to do the Mission Impossible. Talk to Daniel about this. Look, Daniel Box, when I was 13 years old, and I used to go to his house and he used to go smoke weed, he used to steal like $20 from his dad, 30, 40 bucks from his dad, no more than 60 bucks, and he had a roll of hundreds of dollars, like $500-$600 of cash, and he kept it in some sort of drawer in his room. And I'm not kidding. His dad would be in the living room watching games and stuff by himself, and me and Daniel and Robert would be in his room. And he goes, all right, we're gonna go to the movies. He goes, hold on, I'm gonna see if I can get some money from Dad, get some weed, some extra money. He would throw a towel or like a shirt on the ground, and he would slide like doing a Mission Impossible. And I thought it was ridiculous. Like, your dad wouldn't. If you were trying to sneak over there, he can't really see you. He goes, no, he got influenced by the movie Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise, but at that time, that's when the movie came out. So he was doing this Mission Impossible slide, He slides to his dad's room, and I just look, and he goes like, I think around the corner or one of the drawers or some shit like that. And I go back into my room because I don't want anything to do with this. And he takes like 30 or 40 bucks. And he told us all the time, he knew his dad knew he was stealing money from him all the time. Because he knew where he kept all his money. So he was stealing from James all the time, like 40 bucks here, 60 bucks here, and so on. But it was when we were 13, 14 years old, it was just to buy like a gram of weed or to go to the movies and spend extra money on video games. But I thought it was important for me because Daniel knew about it because he said that his dad counted the money all the time and there was always money missing. But his dad knew, Daniel said that my dad, he goes, James knows that the money's missing, it's just he doesn't say anything. But he knows that I'm taking the money, he knows I'm taking 30 or 40 bucks here and there. Well, I want to say this. He knew he had a lot of money. He lives in a 400,000. Out of every house I've ever been to, and any friend's house I've ever been to, the Box family, James's boxes, Daniel Box's, Ricky's house they lived in, was the nicest house I'd ever been to. Like the architectural design of the whole house was probably the prettiest house of any house I've ever been to, in my opinion. If I were to choose, like, look at all the nice houses I lived to, that's probably the most fitted house that I would have chose to pick out. And if someone said, what's your favorite house out of all the friends you ever went to? I would say that his house is the foundation, the structure of his house. So I want to say this because I don't know if Ricky is a transgender or not, but he went to college football. He had a couple college friends that showed up. That played football with him. But I do remember that. He played college football, real college football. And I think he was for Texas Tech, or I don't think it was North Texas. Could have been North Texas. It was somewhere in Texas, but it was a university, and it was a fancy university. I want to say it was Texas Tech, because, North Texas University, Dallas, what other universities? I don't know which one. Texas Tech was like a legendary university to me, at least I understand. It was like the big shots of Texas Tech, right? Right? Because if you went there, you couldn't just go. If you went to Texas Tech, you couldn't just. The people that went to Texas Tech all had the chance to go to North Texas University. But all the people that had the chance to go to University of Texas didn't have the chance or qualify to go to Texas Tech, because Texas Tech was like many more steps above that. So he played college football. At least that's what I was told. And he showed up, and looks like he was pretty big, working out a little bit. And one of the things I say this is because James, he always had all these pills in the refrigerator. In the refrigerator, he had like 15 different bottles of pills, all different kinds, and maybe more than like 20. I'd say 15 to 25 different bottles of pills all over the place, lots. And I never read through them. Most of them look like vitamins and some other stuff, a couple medications. So I don't know, and I knew James really took care of himself really well. I don't know if that was because what transgenders have to do is they take a certain type of hormones and vitamins to create or develop their sex change. I don't know. But I still don't know to this day. I still don't know to this day. But I thought I'd make a video on that.
I'm going to talk about a few other different subjects.